Normally I prefer to do 2-month check-ins, but since there's going to be such a massive check-in for April, I thought I'd go ahead and do like a really small March one, so that way I don't have like this overwhelming 50-minute long video that nobody ever would want to watch. I'm also going to be using my handy dandy book journal because though I remember a lot of the books that I read, I don't remember everything that I felt. I'm gonna start off with Into the Wild. I finally finished this on March 29th. I started it on the 30th of January, so it did take me a while. So this is a biography of a boy named Chris McCandless, written by John Krakauer. They were both mountaineers, people who really love the wild. John Krakauer is still alive. He's a mountaineer and a journalist and a fantastic author. I'm not going to comment on the characters or the plot of this because it was a biography. I have my thoughts and feelings, but I'm not going to share them because ultimately it was a biography. This was a person's real life, so really your opinions aren't valid. But I will talk about the writing style and just how I felt reading the book in general. Krakauer is honestly an impeccable author. The way he paints pictures with his words, like his imagery is literally one of the most visceral of any author that I've ever read. He really just knows what he's doing when he writes, especially when he writes about things like hiking or mountaineering or just like, you know, trying to top a mountain but having to stay in a tent on a really cold part of the mountain because it keeps, you know, having blizzards, those kind of things. I will say my favorite part of the book was actually Krakauer's telling of like when he himself climbed the Devil's Thumb as opposed to most of the book. And I don't know if that's just because since it was Krakauer's life, he was better at telling it and I found it more compelling, or if I just care more about him as a person. The one thing I will comment on is that I did find it very hard to care about Chris McCandless throughout most of the book. But I will say the way that Krakauer wrote the epilogue, my annoyance was overwhelmed with compassion in one fell swoop. So that's a pretty strong thing for an author to do, I think. Ultimately, I gave this book 3 stars because the writing is so good. But I still didn't really care other than that. But I'm not gonna give a rating on characters or plot, so leaving it just at 3 stars. The next book I finished in March was The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. I started this on February 4th and it took me until March 24th to finish it. See, that is a reasonable timeline, I think, for this one, because it's like 880 pages, and it's just kind of intense. Into the Wild is like 200, so I think that might explain a bit of my issues. Anyways, this was published in 2013. It's essentially a murder mystery that takes place in New Zealand during the gold rush. Her characters I found very compelling and diverse, which is ultimately very interesting for a Victorian-esque novel because generally that's just full of white people. So I love that she spun around the old Victorian novel. Her writing is absolutely gorgeous. Like, I don't think I have ever written down as many quotes from one book as I have from hers. Honestly, fantastic. Also, if you're interested in what any of the quotes that I wrote from the book are, you can download the app called Litsy, that's Litsy from the App Store. I'm Bubo the Reader on there. I found that app not too long ago and I was like, holy crap, this is like, it's like Goodreads, but it's like social media for book nerds. And it's really, really cool, and I like the community a lot so far. I highly suggest it if it's something you're into. I will leave a link to it down below in the comments, or in the description below. Also, like, one of the very few books that I've ever read and been like, oh my gosh, I truly don't think I can find a plot hole. Like, every single little detail she tied back together. It was so meticulous and so interesting, and she did it in such a beautiful way where the story felt intricate and interesting the entire time. I honestly also enjoyed an ending for once, which is super rare to me. Normally I am like, wow, you did it that way? Like, that felt like a cop-out or something like that. So love it when that happens. I will say I did want more motive for character decisions. I mean, there was a bit there, like the ones who had like a lot of motive, like you knew what they were up to, but like her more evil characters, I couldn't really figure out like what was their deal, like what made them so bad. Overall, I really, really enjoyed this 880 page book, which I think is a lot for a book to be asked of. So, yay. Ultimately, I ended up giving it 4 stars. All right, now I'm gonna get into the books that I'm currently reading. I'm only gonna go over the ones that I started in March. Everything else that I started in April, I'm gonna talk about in my TBR for the OWL's Readathon. But I am currently still trying to get through some short stories and this, The Phantom of the Opera and Other Gothic Tales. I'm also still slowly making my way through Harry Potter à l'école des sorciers. This has been an arduous task. I was like, yeah, you know Harry Potter super well, so you can totally read it in French. Like, your French is that of a 5th grader. It's fine. You'll be fine, right? Like, that 5th graders can read Harry Potter in English. My biggest issue is that like some things aren't translated exactly the same. And yeah, like my grammar might be that of a 5th grader, but honestly, like, I don't think my vocabulary is. And so I have a lot of issues with that. And I'm still clearly having issues with tenses. So I'll think that I'm saying something and it's actually taking place in like future present as opposed to present. And I'm like, okay. But for the most part, it has been such a learning experience, and I'm really glad to be doing it and pushing myself and trying to get a better handling of the language, because ultimately that's just what's going to make me better at reading and speaking French, is by forcing myself to really do it. I will say though, some of the translations are strange. Every once in a while they'll have like an extra sentence and I'm like, where is this in the English version? Where? Like, you added that in. Or sometimes they will like take a part and then they'll translate a little bit of it. Then there will be a different part from the English version here. And then that part that you were originally at will be here. And then I was like, how does that make sense? And maybe that it's just that I don't understand like paragraph and sentence structure entirely in French. Like, I'm not denying that. I know translations are hard. I'm sure Jean-François Menard did like the absolute best. It's my first time reading a book in French when it wasn't the native language of the original author. So it's been an interesting trip. I'm also reading Made to Stick right now by Chip Heath and Dan Heath for a book group at my work. I've only read past the intro and I should already be at chapter 3 and I'm not yet. So what did you read in March? Did you read anything you really liked? Let me know in the comments below. Have you read any of the books that I've listed today? If you liked any of them or you have like comments, let me know. Leave me a comment. That's great. I hope the rest of you have a wonderful reading day wherever you are.